Morning, everyone. Happy they're still not back at school day. And welcome to the news agenda. Not that it's starting to wear at all. Welcome to the news agenda with me, Fleet Street Fox. And today I'm joined by the Mirror's assistant editor, Jason Beattie. Morning, Jason.
Hello, Susie.
You can hear us. Hooray. Maybe
Yay.
we're technological we've had all week. We're going to take you through the biggest stories of the day, get into the comments, ask us your questions. This is the People's Paper Review. We can't answer them all, but we will answer the best ones. So what have we got today? Well, the Mirror has splashed on the death of the president of the North Wales Sheepdog Society, who in his spare time was jazz drummer for a rock and roll band. Do make an effort to read the tributes to Charlie Watts of the Rolling Stones today and admire him and remember the story of him punching Mick Jagger's lights out for being rude to him. It's quite an unreasonable thing to have said. Now, we're not going to discuss that today because Joe Biden is working hard to get himself off absolutely everyone's Christmas card list this year by sticking to his August the 31st withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now, Jason, this deadline has, of course, moved from being May under Trump to September once Biden came into power, and then last July moving up to August again because he wanted to get out quicker. So I can kind of see the Taliban's wish to get rid of the uninvited guests because it is dragging a bit. But does this mean logistically that the evacuations are going to have to stop quite soon in order to get the troops out next week?
Yes. And well, let's roll back a little bit, Susie, because this was pretty humiliating for Boris Johnson yesterday. You know, he convened this meeting of G7 nations. Those are the kind of most powerful Western nations. Joe Biden was in this virtual meeting. He spoke for a whole 7 minutes. That's one kind of minute for each member. And despite pleas from Britain, France, and other countries to extend the deadline, Biden went no. So we've gone from standing shoulder to shoulder with the United States to being given the cold shoulder by the United States. And as you say, but the consequence of this is that what was already a race against time to try and evacuate as many of the Afghans who are at risk from vengeance and persecution by the Taliban out of the country is now a mad scramble. And because of logistics, we're talking hours rather than days now.
Yeah, and you can imagine the scenes that are going to unfold at the airport when we get to the point where the troops are still there and the planes are still there and loading up, but they're no longer taking human beings on board from Afghanistan who are queuing outside. There's going to be some real difficulties there. I can see from Joe Biden's point of view, all right, he's always been very consistent. He doesn't really see why we were nation building in Afghanistan. He's done what the previous president had done, which is the most popular thing in American for the voters in America, which is to pull the troops out. He's been there pretty much on his own. Well, the Americans have since about 2014 or so. We've had some troops there, but we pulled most of our guys out a long time ago. And now he's made this decision, is having a lot of criticism for it. If he were to change his mind and go, actually, no, we're going to hang around for an extra week, A, he's back at war with the Taliban, B, he's losing more American lives, and C, he would lose all political capital or goodwill because he'd look weak, wouldn't he, if he suddenly decided he was going to stay. Boris Johnson must have been an idiot to think he was ever going to say yes to him.
I mean, it's a kind of, yes, I mean, what you're seeing is a kind of return to kind of traditional American foreign policy. You know, America has always had this long history of isolationism. We kind of tend to forget this. They had to be cajoled and dragged into supporting us in the First World War. They were actually reluctant before Pearl Harbor to engage in the Second World War. You know, there's always been this,
for it.
Yeah, there's always been this large constituency in America which is saying, you know, why do we have to be kind of involved in this world? That changed in the kind of Cold War era. Now they're kind of reverting back to this traditional foreign policy. And as you say, Biden's playing to a domestic audience. This is, you know, politics is the same wherever you go in the world. You know, you look after your base. You make sure you've got the support domestically before you kind of act internationally. The problem with this is, you know, a lot of people lost their lives in trying to fight the Taliban. We lost nearly 300 soldiers, hundreds more injured. And they're asking, well, what was this for? And why was there such an appalling intelligence failure? They thought, or were told, that the Afghan National Army would be able to resist the Taliban advances. They crumbled within, in a matter of hours. Why didn't we foresee this?
Yeah, well, I don't think you need too much intelligence to work out if you give the Taliban 15 months heads up, and they're making more than $1 billion a year in poppy sales and ransoms and various other things like the ivory trade and so on that goes through their territory, that they would use that time to grease the palms of every Afghan commander between Quetta and Kabul. Now, Mike says, morning, Mike, does anyone know whether evacuations stop at 1 second past midnight on the 31st or 1 second past midnight on the 1st of September? Could they please let the Foreign Secretary know? Dominic Raab, not having a good war, is he, really?
Well, no, he had a better holiday, but he had a better war. And rather comically this morning, he was saying, but I wasn't even swimming. The beach was closed, as though that was some sort of excuse.
But he had his own private plunge pool. He didn't need the beach.
Yeah. To answer your question, they're actually quite reluctant to give a specific time for when the evacuation ends, for obvious reasons, because if they say this is the cutoff point, it's only going to create more kind of panic, disruption, and a kind of a desperation by the Afghanis to try and get to the Kabul airport to try and get out, which they're keen to avoid. And there are reports this morning that the Taliban have basically closed most of the routes to the airport anyway. And but some Afghanis have realised that it's too late. I mean, you can only pray for them in this situation. It's going to be pretty horrible out there.
Yes, it's not going to be good at all. And of course, the reports that we're seeing at the moment are coming from journalists on the ground at the airport in Kabul. Some of those, they're going to be split, those journalists, between those who also managed to get on the last flights out and who are reporting on their exit, as it were, and those who stay either by choice or because that's their home country. So they don't even want to think about what those journalists are going to be going through. Please help the Afghanistan people, says someone whose name I'm afraid I can't pronunciate because I don't read Arabic. Unlike Tom Tugendhat, who would be a great Foreign Secretary if only he got the job he quite plainly wants. But keep asking us your questions. Do you think Joe Biden should be sticking it out in Afghanistan? Do you think he's right to pull out? Do you think it's right that Britain is doing what America wants it to and doesn't have an army as big as the Taliban, for goodness sake? Do we have any option? Martin says, why bring these people here in the UK? There's no room. We're full already. When it's the government going to stop this out of control, what's going to be done about this? I don't know how you define full, Martin, but more than 90% of Britain is not built on. We have a lot of.
We could ask Martin a question, though. We could ask him, that we employed Afghani interpreters. We helped. Afghanis helped the effort in fighting the Taliban. They put their lives at risk in doing so. Do we just desert them, Martin? Do we just leave them now to while the Taliban seek vengeance? Do you think that is fair? And there's a lot of people who are coming back, Martin, who are already sort of naturalized, if you like. There have been multiple stories in the newspapers about Afghans who have been granted citizenship and have British passports over the past 20 years of our involvement in Afghanistan, who have come here for a better life, who are working here, who are paying their taxes here, who have gone back to see family, for example, gone to a wedding, gone for a funeral, and have got themselves stuck and need to get out, need to get back, and they can't get to the airport, and they're trying to get to the airport. So there are multiple reasons why multiple people are coming here. And one of them is that they think this country is accepting and tolerant and nice. And apart from Martin, we are. Now, keep asking us your questions. Sorry, Martin, if I'm being a bit rude to you, but there we are. On page 11, there is a really good explanation of how much military kit is in Afghanistan and how much of it is likely to be left behind for the Taliban to play with. 167 fixed-wing planes and helicopters, $200 million worth, Jason, of ammo, Humvees and parts to keep them on the road. Now, the Taliban's probably itching to get its hands on all that stuff. We've already seen this week some stories about US equipment being seen going across the border to Taliban HQ in Quetta in Pakistan. So this is all, we've got to get this stuff out if we can, which does mean that you can't have so many people on the planes, on the transporters, because they're going to be full up with Jeeps and Humvees and everything else.
But the same thing happened when the Soviets pulled out in '89. They left a load of kit behind, and that's why our guys were fighting Taliban with Kalashnikovs, because the Soviets had left them. Who's going to be fighting the helicopters and all this lot when we pull out?
I know, and this is what is so extraordinary. It's the retreat from Afghanistan. It makes you question what was the last 20 years of effort for, and if as a result of that withdrawal we're leaving this extraordinary list of ammunition, as you were saying, 2 million rounds of bullets just for kind of rifles alone. That's before you get to kind of to the Humvees and the hardware and the aeroplanes. You go, well, why do we do this? Why have we allowed this situation to happen? Why wasn't there proper planning for this withdrawal? That is the most extraordinary thing. And why do they think that the Afghan National Army was in any position to take on the Taliban when clearly they weren't?
Exactly. And I don't think it's really a failure of intelligence, because some of the intelligence community was certainly, there are reports appearing in newspapers about how shaky the situation was and what was likely to happen. And the politicians just seem to have overruled it in the way that they do. Now, we just had someone pop up there saying that the 20,000 Afghanis who are supposedly going to be brought here, there we go, Richard, going to be brought here over the next 5 years, only 5,000 this year. I think we've supposed to have got 6,000 out so far, are just 0.00031% of the current population, the same number of births that happen in 14 days. It's probably not going to flood us, is it? And as one of the others just said there, why not just blow it all up on our way out of the airport, Jason? We could pile up all the ammunition in a big heap and do a Bruce Willis and get rid. That's a theory. I'm not entirely sure it would be safe.
I've actually been to Kabul airport. Have I told you this?
No.
And as you drive into Kabul airport, they have this huge concrete bollards on either side of as you come in, with holes in them, and the holes in for you to discharge your ammunition as you go into the airport.
Right. Well, that's always best.
There you go. I just thought that might be a useful tip today if you're trying to get out of Kabul.
Do you know what, the Americans should have those kind of holes outside their schools? That would
PCR
help.
test and get rid of your wasted ammunition.
Yeah. Carol says she's praying for the government and local councils to step up their house building for our local people, for the expected British nationals, and for Afghan refugees, and also all decision makers. You can pray as much as you like, Carol, but I think you're going to find that most people don't want a house built in their backyard, no matter who it's for in this country. And there's an awful lot of opposition to house building, although it's very needed. So the various governments have absolutely failed to deal with that. You're quite right to raise it, but I don't know whether praying is going to make much difference. Now, keep asking us your questions. Get into the comments. What do you think about Joe Biden pulling out? What do you think about ammo dumps outside an airport that work at US schools to stop the gun murders? Who knows? But speaking of bad ideas, now I want to move on to the next story. It is a generally accepted rule of democratic states that we know who our leaders are talking to. So we know which unions, for example, meet with and fund Keir Starmer. We know who donates to the Lib Dems, and quite often what kind of sex they have as well, because the Lib Dems are a funny bunch. We know who goes into Whitehall departments to meet ministers, but we do not know who has been paying to see the Prime Minister, have dinner with the Prime Minister in expensive dining clubs since 2018, Jason. That's 2 Prime Ministers ago. Now, last year, the Tories promised to publish those records in due course, and our colleague Dan Bloom there reports that they still have no plans to do so. In due course means never, obviously. So, Jason, what are they playing at? They're
playing at arrogance, and they're playing at, we've got an 80-seat majority in the House of Commons and we can do what we like. This is, we always kind of say that, Britain is a kind of, a country where we're not corrupt. It's other countries where, backhanders and bungs, kind of grease the wheels of politics. It's a bit of a facade, isn't it, when you can do this? I mean, it is extraordinary that if you've got a very large checkbook, you can then buy access to the Prime Minister and other cabinet ministers. And you can sit down and you can talk to them about whatever you like. And you can possibly, we don't know this for truth, but it's possible, you could actually ask for a favour for some of the money you're going to donate to the Conservative Party. And we are not allowed, or not, it's not been told who these people are and which cabinet ministers they're meeting. Now, that's not just kind of a whiff of kind of dodginess. It absolutely reeks of it. Because, yes, it may all be above board, but if it is above board, then why aren't they revealing the names? If they've got nothing to hide, tell us. Yeah. And if they're not revealing the names, then you must feel that, well, what are they trying to cover up? Yeah. And this matters because, as I say, they may be completely in the clear. They are conservatives. We obviously like to trust them. But they could also be, as I say, these donors could be coming along saying, look, we've got a small problem here. We want to build a few more houses. Yeah. Can you give us a tax break on, let's say, bricks? Just for example. Yeah. Or maybe we have a massive great development and we want it signed off, for example. And these ministers go, well, it's very nice of you. You've given us at least £50,000 this year. And we did enjoy the dinner you had, which was obviously paid for by the finest caterers. Of course, we'd be delighted to do it. Now, I'm not saying what's happening, Susie. I'm not saying it. But there's a great possibility it could be happening.
I think it's highly blimmin' likely, Jason. From what their business wants to their tax breaks to whether they want a roundabout built at the end of their road, I should expect. Yeah. Now, we knew since the days, I think it was David Cameron, set up this £50,000 donation private dining club. You pay 50 grand, you get dinner with the Prime Minister several times a year to bend his ear about stuff. That used to be published, who was in it, and it caused a right stink. Every time it came out, the Mirror bashed them, quite rightly too. But now we know about this extra high-level advisory board for which if you pay £250,000, you get Zoom calls and dinners with Rishi and Boris. And they're not saying anything about that. That appears to be a very recent development. We still don't know who's doing that. But they have said that just because it's called an advisory board doesn't mean the billionaires are advising the PM or asking them for favours. I think it's supposed to mean that the Prime Minister is advising the billionaires.
I think they're obviously advising on home decoration. That's the only explanation.
Now, Mike says Tory corruption is part of Johnson's plan, even shoveling the levelling up fund to areas with overwhelmingly Tory MPs. Constituencies have to vote for them to get their share of the pot. He's quite right, aren't they? I mean, this is just, I'm not going to care. I'm not going to fanny about with it like you have a bit, Jason. It's corruption. It's corrupt. It's the abuse of power. It's saying we're going to sell our prime. His wallpaper can be sponsored, for goodness sake. His food is paid for by someone else. Why wouldn't he sell himself, actually whore himself to the first billionaire or millionaire who comes along, stick him in the House of Lords afterwards if he feels like it, and hope to have his own back scratched when he gets out of power, which hopefully will be sooner rather than later. And it's unreasonable and it stinks. And you know what, Jason? I've said this before and I'm going to say it again. I don't mind people having private dinners with the Prime Minister at all. I think that should happen, and I think they should be selected in the same way as jury service. You get a Millwall supporter, you get a Liverpool supporter, you get a Man U, you get an Everton, right? You even have someone from Chelsea if you have to, but they all go in and see the Prime Minister once a week, and then the next week it's single mums or disabled people or whatever. Fine, have a dinner with the PM, but just make it democratic, not the same bunch of people who are not really acting in everyone else's best interest. Surely.
I mean, this is all part of a pattern, though, isn't it? I mean, I don't think I've come across a Prime Minister who has such a disregard for kind of standards in public life and the kind of the dignity of office. We saw it earlier this week. Boris Johnson allegedly, took a Tory kind of, a taxpayer-funded plane to do kind of, canvassing in the Hartlepool by-election. That's against the rules. But he does it anyway. And there's no proper system of actually policing this. That's the real, but the investigator of Prime Minister standards is appointed by the Prime Minister.
Exactly, but if it's
the members of the Sleaze committee supposed to look into standards of public life are appointed by the Prime Minister.
Exactly.
This is kind of kind of banana republic standards of graft. It's
like saying it's against the rule to nick a chocolate bar from the supermarket, but you've written the rules. There is no punishment. You employ the security guards. Yep. The man who owns the supermarket is your chum. And although it's against the rules, It's your chocolate bar, mate. It's just a complete waste of time. Now, keep asking us your questions. What do you think about Afghanistan and Joe Biden's removal of token from board? Benji says that. What do you think about the private dining clubs the Tories are enjoying and the fact they're anonymous? Do you think that's reasonable? Benji says that anyone would do it. Yeah, I'd go for dinner with the Prime Minister, and I don't like him. And I'd go and I'd ask for things that are my pet.
Susie, have you got £250,000 down back on the sofa?
I don't have 250 grand. I would ask for something that would help other people, like nuclear test veterans getting some recognition. Government subsidy for the Daily Mirror columnists or something like that. Anything, but I would not be sitting there saying, "Can you make me richer, please, Boris?" Anyway, that's just because I'm a better person than Tory donors. We do have some good news going on, and something to make us feel positive and happy. And here it is. Now, there is often talk about Britain being the sick man of Europe, and it turns out we are actually winning one of our health battles. Our blood pressure has dropped off a cliff, and not so far that we're dead, but just enough that we're a bit healthier. It turns out we have some of the lowest hypertension rates in the world. And Jason, it turns out it could be down to the fact that, as the lovely lady pictured there is showing, red wine and a good old cup of tea are really good for your heart. Isn't that wonderful news?
It is 3 glasses a week, unfortunately. I was wondering, and because I'm not a doctor, but if we allowed 4 glasses, does that even better for your heart?
I think that's the point at which it starts to fall off a cliff again.
What is the optimum number of red glasses of red wine I'm allowed a day?
Half of one a day, I think, or less than half.
No, that would just increase my blood pressure.
Can you have 3 at once, or do you have to spread them out?
I don't know. You see, if I'm allowed, if we're going to tell me you can only have half a glass of red wine a day, that's not good for my health, because I'll just get cross and angry about them being restricted.
That's called an addiction, Jason. And also, when we talk about glasses, do we mean a full glass like the one she's got there, which is actually a third of a bottle? Because 3 of those, does mean quite a while. That's fine. But there's one very important thing they've left out in this story here. It's all to do with flavonoids, a substance in your food which can help make good for your heart health. And that they come from berries, apples, and cup of tea, as well as your red wine. But they've missed out the most important bit, Jason, which is you can also find flavonoids in chocolate.
Can you?
Particularly dark chocolate. So,
really?
Chocolate.
So basically, we need to rechange our diet, away from avocados and toast to red wine and chocolate.
Yeah, dark chocolate hobnobs, because it's got oats in as well, you see.
So that's how that's not message.
Dark chocolate hobnob and a gin and tonic and everything else. Gin and tonic's one of your 5 a day. It's made of junipers, isn't it? Now, Sue says, here we go again. Reporters jumping to conclusions. How about the fact there shouldn't have been a full pullout from Afghanistan? The UK had no choice but to follow the Americans thanks to Biden. This utter mess is on his shoulders. As for the Mirror, it's not even fit to clean someone's backside. They're hypocrites. They talk about the government disclosing names, who they're talking to, yet in many reports they won't say who they're talking to or where their information is coming from because they something. I'm assuming you're talking about sources there. I've forgotten your name straight away. I think it was Sue. Sources and so on. The reason that we don't say sometimes who we're talking to at the Mirror is because it protects someone's life or job. The reason the Tories aren't saying who they're talking to is because it protects their blushes, which is a different thing entirely. And as for everything else, yes, you sort of said all the stuff we've said. You kind of said the same thing. So I'm not quite sure what your problem with the Mirror is, but we are equally able to wipe other people's backsides, it would appear. Robin says, what about those massive trade deals with the USA that the mighty Boris told us about? Jason, do we have one of these yet? We don't.
And it's going to take a long time. And
we can sell them some Humvees. They're short.
Yeah. And the problem is that, the US, they have huge lobbies in Washington for the farming industry and for the pharmaceutical medical industries. Those are the 2 biggest lobbyists, basically, in Washington. And those are the 2 areas where any deal with the United States is going to become unstuck. We don't want their hormone-soaked beef, chlorine kind of, clonated chicken, etc., etc. And we really don't want US medical firms getting even more of a foothold in the NHS. Those are the two major demands probably from America. We get to sell them some whiskey and some hobnobs for you.
Maybe some cheese.
Yeah.
Stuff that doesn't come out of the can. That might help.
I've heard cathedral cheese cheddar is very popular in the United States for some reason. Who knew? Yeah, that's why it's going to get, it's going to take so long to do this. And you'll probably find that by the end of it, it's actually kind of, be a marginal increase in kind of in trade between the two countries, but it won't be massive.
So much more to come on, isn't there? All the trade deals and everything else with the same people just pulled out of Afghanistan. And now, Karen says it's only like what happened in both world wars. People throughout the world united to overcome the Nazis. People struggled with lives then, yet people gave lives for king and country and world peace. Where's the compassion gone today? You're very right, Karen. And also it's worth remembering, there is a great account on Instagram called Working Class History, which I recommend, which was telling me only the other day about the number of communist socialist revolutions that followed the Second World War and the collapse of the national structures all over the place, and which America and France and other colonial powers were busy trying to quash and stop these revolutions, which eventually were quite successful. So huge change does come out of big conflict and pandemics. As to say, George says, what's this all about? Rewind.
He answers that every day, George.
I open the window in the morning and scream it out loud. So our only hope, I suppose, Karen, is that the 20 years we were in Afghanistan and gave people freedom and democracy will have planted enough of a seed that some of it continues to flower after we've pulled out and left them to it. But on the plus side, we can have chocky bickies and wine and we'll all be healthier for it. So that's what I'm going to do for the next week until the news agenda is back next Wednesday, healthier and fitter than ever before. Thank you for joining me, Jason. Thank you, everyone, for taking part. There's no news agenda on bank holiday, so take the day off, everyone, and we'll see you next Wednesday. Bye-bye.